Welcome to the Authentic Living and Loving channel, where we feature stories about individuals that are living to the beat of their own drum, doing things a little bit out of the ordinary, living authentically, and inspiring others to do the same. My name is Dr. Jordan Alexander, and today we're fortunate to have with us Susan Holt from Wellington, New Zealand. Susan was born in Rotorua in New Zealand and moved to Wellington when she was just 4 years old. Creativity was in her soul, and it still is. She began acting at age 9. She was the lead in a radio play her father had written, the other in a TV program where she had to throw a tantrum in a supermarket. She manages her depression, and when asked, why don't you do something useful? Ended up finishing a uni degree in linguistics and then headed over the Tasman to complete an acting and theater craft course. In Australia, she first dabbled in writing, and when she came back home to New Zealand, she decided that she would have to work part-time to support her creative habit. She's found herself since then in theaters, acting on TV, and nearly 5 years ago, decided she'd become a writer. I loved her first book, Catching the Last Tram, and she's finishing her second. It's such a pleasure to welcome you, Susan, today, this creative soul, onto the program. Kia ora and welcome.
Kia ora, Jordan. Nice to meet you. Hello.
Susan, what was it like growing up? You mentioned that you had 2 older brothers and you had an interesting start to your journey. Just share with us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, that was in Miramar near the airport, and so we had the train and the planes all the time. But it was kind of lonely because my brothers were much older than me, and my mother was dealing with being a single parent suddenly, and so I felt quite isolated, and so that was when I think my depression issues started. It was quite early. I don't remember ever not struggling with it. So but you grow up, you learn things, you become more you.
Yes, absolutely. And did you always think that you were going to be a writer, be an actress? I mean, were you one of those kids that was always sort of showing off in the middle of the parlor and as people were in behind you?
I think I don't know about the writing thing. I think that came a lot later, but acting and performing was definitely in my blood. My dad was an actor, and my uncle as well, his brother, and so I always liked performing. But then that was also counterbalanced with the New Zealand way of, oh no, you mustn't put yourself forward. So I remember countless times going, oh, I could do that, oh, but that would be showing off. And so I stopped myself. So there's that. Yeah. Now I'm older and less constrained by that, which is good. And so I do more, and I know that I can do it. Yeah.
It is a sort of the tall poppy syndrome here, isn't it? And I know that, I mean, the creative pursuits, as it were, are quite often exposing yourself to other people. Are you one of these people that when you get a review, you're worried about what people are thinking about, whether it's your acting or your writing, or how do you manage those sorts of things?
I think it depends on who you are, who they are. If they're an expert, then I obviously listen a lot more closely. If they're a regular reader or something, then I take it in my stride as much as possible. Obviously, it puts a little pull on an hour or two, but I don't let it get me down, and I try and make as much out of it as I possibly can. So I look at it, oh, maybe I could improve my writing from that feedback, unless of course it looks like they haven't really read it properly and they didn't understand what I was trying to say. Fortunately, they're few and far between so far, and but yeah, no, it's good to take feedback. It can be hard, but it's necessary.
It is. It's kind of, and it's the lifeblood of writing as well, and performing. And with your first novel, Catching the Last Tram, which I did read and did love, um,
Good.
maybe just take us through a little bit of the process that you went through. That you mentioned to me earlier that it came to you in a dream. So I'm sure that listeners would love to hear about how did that start, and describe for us the process that you went through.
Yeah, sure. No, that was interesting, especially for me. I decided that I wanted to put my television away for a while, and I was really surprised that not long after that I started having these really vivid dreams. And so perhaps it's because the television does all the thinking for you and does all the work. Um, and so my brain was starting to enliven. And it's possible I also had a fever. So I woke up at 4 in the morning. I was living by myself, so I could just get up, and I'd had this full on dream, which was just a story from beginning to end. And so I felt like I had to write it down. I've had a few of those in my life, and sometimes you write it down, and then you get to the morning and you go, oh, that's, yeah, I'm not going to share that. Um, but this one was a pretty good story, and so I sat on that for a few years, and thinking, oh, yeah, that's a possibility that I could write down. It has an ending, which is always a good thing for a story, having an ending before you begin. And so finally I went full-time writing, and I'd already started writing a book which hasn't come to the light of day. It's not really ready at all yet, but I decided to inject NaNoWriMo in it. So National Novel Writing Month happens in November. You're challenged to write a 50,000 word novel in the 30 days of November. And so I started that, and realized, nearly 1,700 words a day is a lot. And if you miss a couple of days, it's even more. So it's a short story. It's a novella. But it took me 6 weeks. But I got my momentum up by using NaNoWriMo to go ahead and do that. And so then the challenge after that was getting the cover done, and that's I realized I think I knew before that people do judge books by their covers. And so I needed to make a really good cover, and looking into it, specifically online, there's such an art to it. It's really subtle and emotional, and it needs to take a couple of seconds. And so fortunately, I knew a designer, and she's done a brilliant job on the cover of my book, which I'm really happy with, and it's got me some good remarks and follow through. And so then there was that, and then designing the interior, and all the things that I didn't know were necessary. And so I got it together, got it printed, also put it online on Amazon. And so that was easier than getting it printed, because anyway. And then the next thing was nobody knew me from a bar of soap. So marketing and promotion, now that is definitely still a weak point of mine. But I'm pretty gregarious, and I'm out there, and I will say hello, and go and talk to people. Like my friend said, oh, go and talk to Raybon Khan, and I was like, okay. So I got up and off you go. And it was kind of like almost like a truth or dare sort of thing. Go and talk to him. Okay, so I will. And whereas if she hadn't been there, I probably wouldn't have, because I would have been shy, but because my friend was there watching. So personality types really help. Many authors can be quite retiring and shy and all that kind of stuff, and I understand that completely, but I'm not. And so that's
No.
lucky. That's
No,
lucky for me.
it's funny. It's funny that with the marketing side, you don't really worry about when you're writing, or you're trying to finish something, a piece of work. There's literally almost an equal amount of effort that goes into all of the non-writing parts. It certainly was a big
Definitely.
surprise, for me. And I know what you mean by the we've both got books at the underground bookstore in Wellington, and
Yep.
when you work with different authors on the stall, the more retiring ones sort of stand behind the banner, or the books, they've got them, all the books sort of in front of them, so that somebody's got to come up to them, which people don't do. I mean, we've already talked about New Zealand being, rather reserved in that way. So it is quite funny, the different
Yeah.
personalities, you know?
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely.
But
Yeah, yeah.
you've got the gift of gab, and you also are quite funny. I mean, you make me laugh all the time. And so,
Great.
you probably find the marketing a little bit easier maybe than other people. Do
Yeah,
you think?
yeah. I suppose the other aspect that I didn't mention was the business side of things. When you write a book, you're actually, and you want to publish it, you're actually starting a business. And so once I realized that after I'd published the book, I had to run to catch up. And so I joined a businesswoman's networking group. And that was another thing that was an asset to me. And I've learned a lot from them.
So Susan, if you had to start again, you've already got the first one and almost the first two under your belt, and a couple of unfinished products as well. If you had to start over fresh, if I'm a budding writer out there, what advice would you be giving me, either for the writing process or all those other dimensions around the business, the marketing? What's your how-to guide?
I would say, and this is something that I haven't mastered, is continuing to write after you get to the business and promotion style of things. Because if you're a writer, you need to continue to produce work, and turning it off and turning it on again isn't the most effective way to get things written and to produce. And so blocking out time or whatever you need to do, so that your creative muscle continues to work, is something that I would
That
advise.
is such good advice, because you do become um, caught up in all the busyness of the market. You haven't posted on social media, you haven't looked at getting more reviews, you haven't, there are so many things that you can do. And
Mm,
it's like any muscle. It's a great way of describing it. If you don't use it, it turns to jelly.
yeah. Got plenty of those already.
Oh, it's crazy. Now I've had the benefit of meeting part of your inspiration, part of your support network. Um, I'm a big romance and love fan, as you know. I'm sure that the listeners would love to hear your love story. Do you mind sharing a little bit about, because I love it, because as an impulsive Gemini, I think your story is fabulous. So I'd love for you to share that with us.
Yeah, sure. All right. Yeah, like I said, my childhood was quite lonely and isolated, and so I I, I, I was lonely for a long time, and the romantic side of things would definitely have been the epitome, in my imagination, of how to solve that particular issue. And lots of people would say, "Oh no, live for yourself and have your own life and all that kind of stuff." And I thought, okay, well, I'll try and do that. It didn't always work. In fact, most of the time it didn't. But now that I have love, I know that having love is a legitimate, wanting to have it is a legitimate need. So go ahead and want that. That's perfectly legitimate. You might not get it, but go ahead and want it. um, and then then you figure out the consequences of that, I suppose. Okay, that was a bit down. Never mind. So I came back to New Zealand. I started my trying to get some acting work and things like that. And in 2009, I was doing sound and lighting for 4 shows in a row, so I was quite busy. Um, and uh, and that was fun and great. I was sad that I wasn't on the stage, but I was watching these amazing shows, so that was good and inspirational. And but during that time, one guy sort of um, supported me in that. So right from the beginning, my new friend Robert, whom I just met, um, came along. He was the only one who came along to my invitation to come along to these amazing shows. And so he came, and we had hot chocolate afterwards, and he was lovely. And then he asked me on a date. I was like, oh, okay. I'm 39. Okay, well, I wasn't really sure. It was kind of out of the blue, because I wasn't sure of his status, marital status, or anything. I thought, oh, okay. And then I met his daughters at church, and they were lovely. They were the ones who greeted me at the door, in fact. And so we went on our date, and and you and I called myself gregarious, but Robert talks a mile a minute, and he's crazy. crazy in the whole gregariousness. He's more out there than I am. And so his first test when we went out on a date was, is he going to let me talk? And he did. Good lad, passed the test. And so we went out on another couple of dates. But it was a few months later that a few weeks later. Actually, I can't remember. I think it was maybe a month or two later. We finally kissed, and then
Ooh.
3 days later, we went out on another date. We went out to Makara, which is on the west coast of Wellington, and it was full moon. Um, Placid seas. The people were cooking fish on the beach. It was dark, and we walked along. And he's impulsive, as you mentioned before, and he said, "Will you marry me?"
Wow.
Wow! And I went, "I don't know yet,"
Oh.
and and I cried because it was full on, and he was, and so I made him wait. Um, for a while, and he said he tried to back off and be cool about it. But a month later, he invited me around to Pawatahanui Inlet where he lives, and we went for a walk, and the moon was up and the sea was placid, and I said, I will say yes to that offer. And so we got engaged, and then 8 months later we got married in 2010 when I was 40. So long time waiting, but so good.
Oh, it's a great story. I mean, and I think sometimes you have to be impulsive and do things. And I do think, I mean, I'm in love with love itself. So I do think that being with someone is so inspirational, especially if you're writing, and it does help you, with support and just somebody to share all those things with.
Yeah.
I wonder, because you had come from. Um, like many people, it's not abnormal to come from a broken home, but
Mm.
or maybe we shouldn't even be saying broken. I'm thinking of NLP. I should probably just say from a different, diverse start. Do you think that colored your views on relationships and getting attached, or being, finding that special someone? How do you think that played out in your own
Probably.
love journey?
I imagine for sure. Of course, it's hard to know what you don't experience yourself. All I know is that I didn't have a dad, and I imagine that that kind of relationship helps you learn how to relate to men and better. I mean, I had older brothers, but that's completely different. Brothers are different from fathers. And as I know now, because Robert's a great father, and he's not my father, so that was a bit freaky. No, sorry, I do say odd things sometimes, but he's shown me what a father is supposed to be, and that's renewed my belief in fatherhood, because he's a great father to his 4 children,
Yeah.
and um, yes, being part of a broken family, I almost was sort of hyper aware of being probably the only person in my primary school that was from a broken home that I was aware of, because it was quite, I mean, um, less common back then,
Mm.
or at least people didn't talk about it, I suppose. Um, and so the assumption was that I would be cynical towards romantic relationships, but I don't think that was because I was aware of it. I don't think that was what happened to me, because I'm me, I suppose. So yes and no.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because as you're speaking, I was thinking, um, my father died really young, and he was an alcoholic as well, and
Mm,
so that didn't help. And I do think that,
mm,
I mean, the research shows that your early interactions, particularly before age 7, sort of it creates a set point of what you define as normal. So that you're always kind of trying to get back to normal. It's like the pendulum swinging. You're always trying to get to that equilibrium. And so I think it's interesting, as I ended up in a situation where I think I overcompensated being in love with love and romance and filling the void. and with the almost the perfect scenario, and then kept measuring up, well, is this it, is this it, is this it, but at the same time, um, kind of feeling like, oh, well, it's actually not going to work, or this normal is kind of abnormal. So you saying yes and no, I kind of can relate to that, because I think it is both, and you have to sift and sort through that.
Mm. Yeah,
So
there's definitely deliberate things. I mean, you can live your life, and you can also look at yourself living your life. And I think it's good to keep that in balance, and being able to step outside of your life and look at it sometimes can help you progress in a good direction, because you can say, okay, my attitude towards this might not be very helpful to me. And so let's see if I can change that, or think about it differently. I think being that gives you more, I hate that word, control. Um, um, Whereas, I guess when I say control, people can talk about being controlling and stuff like that, and I don't want to go there. But having control of yourself is useful. Being a victim is not useful.
mm,
And so I'm trying to head in the direction of having control, or having more self-control, I suppose, is
mm,
the thing, because
mm.
that's the only thing you can control. You can only control yourself. You can't control anyone else.
Well, so on your journey, sort of, you've mentioned that you've suffered from depression in the past, and even just talking about now about the tools that you can use to try and move yourself forward and change perspective. Are there things that you've managed to learn along the way that help you cope with those? When life can hand you a curveball or something, do you still have bouts of days where you just want to pull the blankets up over your head, or how does that affect your day-to-day living, and what are some of the coping mechanisms that you use?
Yes. Excuse me. Um, to learn, I I yeah, as I said, I was suffering with depression from forever, until it came to a head when I was 25. I think that was because I got RSI in my neck and shoulder, and I was off work for 10 months. And so when you sit still, there's nothing to do but figure out what's going on inside, because that's all there is. I couldn't cook, couldn't put the washing out, that kind of stuff, and all that stuff comes up, which was hard, but good in a way, in that the great, if you have an infection, it's better to bring it out, that kind of thing. Um, um, my friend Kathy, years ago, during that time, she looked at me and she said, "That light's gone out of your eyes. You need to do something about that. How about you go to the doctor and get some antidepressants?" And to me, that was, oh my, that seems like a concession to the darkness. But no, after, it took a while for the right dosage to set in. That meant that I could get up in the morning,
Mm,
alongside a great session with a good counselor, to talk through the issues, past relationships, dad, that kind of thing. Um, that heals those things, and then the antidepressants might not be necessary anymore. It depends on what your problem is, but not being afraid of going on antidepressants is a great start, and getting that, and then getting that counseling, and then learning self-management. So self-management, as you say, these tools. Um, uh, Learning to recognize when you're spiraling down. Oh, this is the beginning of that path where I usually go down and end up in a big hole. Maybe I should stop now. Maybe I should try and, even I remember at one particular course I went to, said, visualize a stop sign and say stop. And that kind of mechanism, coping mechanism, can be helpful, and you learn these things. My struggle with depression, I'm not so depressed so much anymore as anxious. So now that I'm happy, with, I've got love and things like that, which has made a massive difference in my life. It's kind of turned into anxiety a little bit more. But Robert helps with that as well. Robert is the biggest optimist you will ever meet. Um, and his positivity, his glass half full mentality, his how do we fix this rather than what is the problem. He's a grown up, which always helps. And he is, as you say, my biggest support system and my biggest fan. And I couldn't do this creative life without him.
No,
So
no,
yeah,
that's really interesting. I mean, that the having the support network, having friends that can actually have the
yeah,
conversations with you. And it's interesting because we started out with the tall poppy side of things.
mm,
And I think increasingly, the more we're willing to talk about issues that um, everyone struggles with stuff, it's not like,
mm,
we wouldn't be interesting people if we didn't have the highlights and the low lights in the characters and the personalities we have. We write about these people because they're human,
mm,
and they're human traits. And yet sometimes we can be so unforgiving when we have a bad day. I mean, it's great that we can see silver linings, and it's great to be a Pollyanna. I love that. But also sometimes you're mad as hell and you want to do something, you've been working really hard and you're tired and you don't feel 100%. And to be able to talk to people rather than just swallow it and not express that, I think we've got to be more open about sharing those real elements, because
yes,
more people do have those dimensions to their personalities than not.
yes.
So might as well be authentic about it and start to own that stuff.
Yeah,
you
I
know
think we are moving in that direction. I think that people are a lot more open about these depressions and mental illnesses of like kind and things like that. There might be a way to go, or different people are at different levels. But the more open we are, the more people are encouraged to be able to do the same, and that's healthy for everybody.
So is it sort of a step-by-step process, like, so if you were saying to somebody that's kind of at the beginning of that, when you were 25, when you're just recognizing, hey, look, I need to get some help at this, or is there anything that you would say to somebody that might be listening, that's saying, gosh, I know something's not right. I know that I need to do something, but I'm not really sure where to even begin.
Mm. I would say, I mean, just like my friend Kathy said, you can go and visit your GP. So that's somebody that you can know and trust usually, and they will say, okay, well, I know I can refer you to counselling, or things like that. I'm pretty sure they're going to know at least a channel through which they can put you. And if it's severe enough, the antidepressants might be a useful tool for you to be able to recover. Um, and then learning your own lessons. So yeah.
Okay, good. So Susan, when you came back to New Zealand, you had said that you'd started a few, more on the acting side. We've covered a bit of the writing. I want to delve a little bit on the acting side. So you were in a movie, Aftershock, which was about Wellington after an earthquake, and I can almost remember the Salvation Army Red Shield Appeal, because when you had mentioned that before, I thought your face looked familiar from that, and I thought that was probably it. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you fit the acting side within your writing? And do you still, if you had something to do over, would you do more acting for TV? Are you trying to get into movies? How does that whole acting side of your creativity fit into Susan Holt's life?
Um, my first thought is acting and writing are very similar in that you often you get the backstory, and then you improvise on top using that information. That's what I found, particularly with the first book that I mentioned that hasn't been published. And that first book is how I learned to write, really. And so I put two people in a room and knew who they were and where I wanted to go. And their extraordinary responses and the improvisation that came out was fascinating and yeah, quite magical. And so acting has always been a thing of mine, even when people said, "Oh, you should do something useful." Um, and that was what they said also for my music. So I played the piano and things like that. And I sing now as well. So so where was I going with that? Um, acting. That's right. So my outlet with acting at the moment that I'm trying to develop is audiobooks. I voice audiobooks now, and that's a great marriage of writing and acting and discovering um, how the voice works with with telling the story. I when I made the audiobook of Catching the Last Tram, I realized that it was different from the book. Not because the words were different, but because I knew what the words meant. And perhaps with my fledgling writing ability, I hadn't been able to put all that meaning in there, or it was just not possible. And so my voice brought through a whole lot more meaning and a lot more humor. I laughed a whole lot more with my audiobook of Catching the Last Tram. Than I did with the reading, with the writing of it. And so so that's exciting for me. I feel that audiobooks is a piece of art or a performance that I can do
It's
and that I enjoy.
the audiobook. It's interesting. When I was doing a signing in Canada recently, there was a woman who stopped by the table and she said, "Oh, I don't do paperback anymore. I do audiobooks. Do you have audiobook?" I said, "Of course I do. As any good salesperson does. Here's something." And I asked her. I said, "So I have to ask you, how do you feel about the author reading the audiobook versus another person reading the audiobook?" And I'm sure that there's as many opinions about this as there are book covers or whatever. But this woman had said um, she really enjoys having the author read the book for the exact reasons that you're talking about. She was saying that, first of all, it's their book, so they know where they're trying to convey. People will still always take away their own interpretation of any book or any creative work because they relate it to their own experiences. But I was almost relieved to hear it because I had heard almost equal and contrary opinion about you should get a professional actor to record
Hmm.
your audiobook. So, what's your view on who should do the reading?
um, yes, there is a specialness to authors doing their own audiobook, but if they can't, if their voice isn't free enough or able enough to convey that meaning, then they need to be able to recognize that. Because it would be wonderful if you could do your own audiobook and cheaper. But you're not always, you can't always do it. It's just not possible if your voice is monotonic or it doesn't come across well in the recording, or it's just croaky or really hard to listen to. Then nobody's going to listen to it more than 15, than 5 minutes,
Yeah,
because they'll
true.
just turn it off. So you
Yeah,
don't want that.
no, no.
So you have to, I suppose, be honest with yourself and get an assessment of how you read it, and go for it. Otherwise, call me.
Yeah, of course. Now with audiobooks, and I know that when I used to drive, I don't drive now because we live in town, so it's easy, but um, they're growing so quickly. Audiobooks are growing so quickly. Do you, I mean, from a user of both mediums, I guess, do you see, or is it going to be the end of paperbacks? Do we, there's more Kindles around, there's more audiobooks. What's your prediction for the future in the literary world, Susan?
Because I'll put my little, seeing into the future glasses on. No, I don't think anything's going to go out of um, out of vogue. I think people are moving back to paper books. I think for me, last night I was thinking about this issue and thinking we are we're made body, soul, and spirit, and so we're and so we read with our hands, we read with our eyes, we read with our ears, and I think that depending on your personality type or how you work, you can take in a work of art in a different way. I listened to an audiobook a few months ago, fantastic, um, and I loved it so much, and I wanted to support the author, so I bought her ebook as well, and I'm reading it, and it's a slightly different experience, and so I think they're going to be almost equal billing as we go ahead into the future. That those who listen will listen, those who it will sort of settle down into all mediums, I think.
Mm, mm. I think you're probably right. I mean, it's kind of like non-dairy alternatives of soy, rice, or oat milk. It's
Yeah, yeah,
there.
right.
There's a place for all of them. Um, it is a different experience because even uh, you know, listening to the audio book versus the reading of it, you I think you almost the reader's an essential part of the process,
Yes.
and the reader might be in a good space or bad space or just had a breakup or just
Mm,
met the person of their dreams, and they're I guess they're you're that's what makes it so amazing with what in any creative um work of art, depending on where the person is in their place that they are in, will be a different experience.
yes. And even during in the fourth dimension time, if same person reads the same book, 6 months or 2 years apart, and it will have a different effect on them because they're in a different place, and they will, if it's a really good piece of work, you reread the same book, and it can have a different effect and change you in a different way. So.
Are there any books that you sort of have reread, or that you like to reread, or that fall into that category?
Oh, yeah, yeah, definitely. Sorry. The one that always comes to mind is The Power of One. I think I've read that at least a couple of times, if not more, because that's a growing, a person growing, and I think that's always struck me. Um, and story for me is always easier for me to absorb than nonfiction. Um, I think it just goes straight to the heart instead of having to go through the brain, which has enough to do. And there are I read the Bible, which is a collection of books, and they're all different. There's poetry and songs and narratives, and if you want to see a story told different ways, there's the Gospels with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. My favorite is John because he's so melancholic, artsy, sort of metaphoric, and the word was this, and I love him, and how he describes himself as the disciple that Jesus loved. I mean, great. And so it's just so yeah, that's definitely something I go back to often.
And I think I correct me if I'm wrong, but did you hint on a few Bible references in Catching the Last Tram, or did I make that up? There were a few.
Probably.
There were a couple, I
Usually.
think, things in there.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I think there were a few, but I mean, you're a you're a church person. Does your faith and your spirituality influence, or I guess it does, obviously, but how does that influence your creative pursuits, how you live? It's part of your authenticity.
Definitely. um I I think the greatest themes of life come from your spirituality, from your relationship with the creator, and so um it's essential. It's who I am. It's whom I've become, how I grow. It's my lifeline. If all else fails, then that's always there. Um, that's that rounding. yeah, it's what was the question? Yes.
how
I,
does your spirituality and your faith and indeed the church, and your relationship with that structure and that, you know, that part of your life, how does
mm,
that translate into what you write, how you act? You know, do you know, a lot of people will say a little prayer before they go out and on audience. A lot of people, you know, will do intention setting before they start to write. You know,
mm.
there's such a wide range of spiritual sort of beliefs and things. I mean, it's a lot broader than just Christianity that people rely on and get a lot of buoyancy in their lives from.
I um I find, you know, along with my dreams, um, that the times that most that I get a lot of inspiration from are at church when I'm listening to someone talk, or when we're singing at church. I get pictures and stories, and I often have to sit down and write them down quickly, or in my quiet times talking to God. Um, that recentering to, you know, my origins, where I'm from. You know, I'm sitting on the earth, in the midst of a creation that's incredible and awesome, and shows the personality of this vibrant, you know, creator. Wow. And also that tells me that what I create automatically has my heart in it, and so what my heart has in it will come out. And if it's, even if it's just a story, you know, people say, oh, it's just a story. And so you write a story, but themes come out, even if you don't realize it. Your heart comes out in your writing, whether you're trying to, or it's best if you don't try to, because you know, no matter what you're trying to preach, people don't like being preached at.
Mm.
You know, so you have to be extraordinarily good writer, or very subtle, or I don't know what. But you know, people can always tell when they're being preached at and they don't like it much. So don't.
Yeah, preaching. I think that's right. I think people have to find their own way of expressing how their faith and their ties to their own spirituality translate into the work that they do. And
Mm,
I guess it's almost another sort of taboo subject, depending on um, where you sit on that spiritual spectrum too, because some people, you know, they don't want the God factor, but then they sit and they do the yoga and they've got the you know, connecting to a bigger picture in that way. So it's funny how we get stuck on terminology and the words sometimes, but you know, they're in essence, that is us, you know, trying to express ourselves authentically in whatever way that relates to what's authentic to you, really.
yeah, we're all on the road, all on the road, and we can help each other, or we can hurt each other, or we can, you know, pretend to step off the road, but we're still on the road, really.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's interesting. And I think how that translates into your writing, you know, I certainly didn't get any preachy feel from the Catching the Last Tram, but tell me about your next book. I mean, is that a carry on from, you know, I know it's not due out, so we're you know, for until early next year, but
Yeah.
where does that fit in the whole Susan Holt journey?
So the next one's called "The Heart Casts No Shadow," which took a while to figure out that title, but it's it's got me further on the journey of speculative fiction, so a little further away from Earth, but still close to the human heart. Um, um, and so it's another inspired by another dream that I had, which, well, if I told you the dream, then you know you'd get the whole thing. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to
Don't
tell you
tell
the
me,
dream.
don't tell me.
No, it has romance as part of it because that's just part of me. It's not a romance because it could, because I think, you know, they define romance as, if you took the romance out, then it's not a story, or it doesn't work. Whereas this would probably work without the romance, sort of. And so yeah, I've always liked other planets, speculative fiction of that sort. I love Anne McCaffrey, and Amy Harmon, and Kenley Davidson, and things like that. And so I love those things because you can step just a little away from from where we are and who we are, but still talk about us, because everyone knows that the story is always about us. And so yes, um, another woman battling an evil force, and a rescuer. I don't know what this is about me, but actually, one of the themes I'm seeing in my writing is a lonely woman, and I suppose I was a lonely woman for a long time. So I'm hoping that the kind of things that I'm writing about, the stories, um, will connect with women who have a lonely heart, and will help them heal and move, and grow. So yeah, that's definitely a theme that seems to come out in a lot of things I do.
It's interesting that I always think that books fall onto your lap when the time is right and when you're ready to receive them, and I think what you're saying, there are a lot of people out there that do find solace in and inspiration from different books, and that's fantastic. In my own writing process, as I started with the I love you, send money, the romance scam side, and it was a very painful part of the journey. The next part sort of takes a little bit lighter and a little bit funner, and I'm hoping by the third one that it's the evolution as a writer, as an author. You track through that, and other people can see that journey as well. And maybe
Mm.
maybe for you it sounds like it's a progression in you as a writer as much as it is in the story that you're telling.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, very much so. This is my next step. There are other thoughts in mind for other books coming, but if I talk about it, then I probably won't write it. So I'll shut up now.
Okay, no, that's cool. So if you were to project yourself outward 5 years from now, you've got these other areas of your creativity that are being fed. Where do you see that? Are you working with any Kiwi actors, or are you the next Peter Jackson superstar? Are you the extraordinary audiobook lady? What does the future hold in the next sort of few years?
Yeah, well, I suppose all of the above. I'd love to get into the audiobook. I enjoy reading reading people's stories, um, out loud, and making that performance, and giving that meaning and expression to it. The dream has always been to work with Peter Jackson or somebody like that. Um, and they're yeah they're but um, so I've written my own play as well with other people, and so I suppose I'm heading out in all sorts of directions, fishing, hoping for some great comebacks, more books, and more audiobooks, but hoping to express. I got into musicals a couple of years ago as well, so that's a new thing for me, but that takes a lot of time and energy, and so I need to make sure that I still do. I'm trying to do too much, she says, starting another sentence. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, I just need to make sure that I'm not trying to do everything at once.
Yeah. So, how do you define success? I mean, you're sampling at the salad bar or the buffet of life or the ice cream parlor. Pick an
Ice
analogy.
cream.
Ice cream.
Yeah,
We'll go with ice cream. And so, I mean, do you have a view in your mind of what success is, or do you have the little successes along the way? What kind of keeps you motivated and on the path of being
yeah.
successful?
I suppose the why, as people talk about, your why is might be a little more indefinable than it should be. There's that wanting to change people's hearts and minds, so that they learn and grow as I have learned and grown. And with the stories that I've read as I've grown up, I know how much they affected me in movies and books and things like that. But that's hard to measure, so it needs to be a little bit more tangible. in that, a lot more people read my books, buy them particularly, and so that I get engagement, that there is a following. That's a means to an end. In that, I'm not, don't just want to be famous for being famous sake. I want to influence in a good way, and so that would be more of a why than just an
Mm,
empty fame, if you know
mm,
what I mean.
mm.
But yeah, so yeah, measures of
Okay.
success. Yeah,
Okay.
and still
So
being, still standing and being healthy.
yes, yes. And do you feel that you're living your love? Like is this the poster child for, one thing 1 minute, but this, it sounds like you're doing a lot of the things that make your heart sing, how would you say that you're living your love, Susan?
Yes, definitely. Um, and because I've met my love, and this love is the most supportive, thing in my life. I couldn't do it without Robert. Robert is my enabler, my listener, my encourager, my rational mind. Sometimes he's like, "Does that help?" And so he's always listening. He's the best, and I couldn't do this without him. And so I'm incredibly grateful for him
Mm,
every day.
mm, mm. That's great. So is he your equivalent of your muse?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's fantastic. So there'll be a lot more romance and love coming in the stories in the future for sure.
Yes, I'm pretty sure it will be.
That's fantastic. So Susan, just as we're sort of wrapping up here and getting sort of towards the end of our time together, do you have some advice for other people that are wanting to follow their dreams? And it might not, I mean, the creative side of things, I think a lot of people are discouraged. Certainly you were as well, to follow those more creative paths. You're never going to make any money being an author.
Yeah,
What good is it to be a playwright or perform in, but those are the people that are doing those things they're just, they couldn't not be doing them. And so
mm,
what's your advice when the naysayers come out and the people come out with their secateurs to cut down the tall poppies and all that? What do you say to them?
yeah. It takes courage and bravery, to take your own path. It was uh, very scary, going over to Australia, to a whole new country. Um, but I suppose I felt I needed the move out of where I was, so that I could make that step forward into acting, and do that kind of thing. Um, the Your company, the surrounding yourself with other creatives. Um, be careful if you feel that you're an isolated person, that you're what do they call it, out the opposite of a gregarious person, an introvert. If you're an introvert, that's fine. Be aware of that, but you still need other people. And so surrounding yourselves with other creatives, with other encouraging people, um, on a regular basis is essential. And also help someone else. Um, One of Jordan Peterson's 12 um, something or others, his that book is treat yourself like you're someone that needs help. I suppose you can practice on someone else who needs help, first, so that you know what that looks like. If there's that balance, um, but yeah, helping someone else is a great way to take you out of yourself, and move everybody along.
Mm. That's really important. The courage, finding that courage,
Mm.
and stepping out. I know that there's a lot of. I remember when I was in an exec team around the board table, and I'm a bit of an extrovert, and there were a couple of introverts on and around the table, and I was a lot younger, and I just couldn't understand why we didn't have the big hurrah around the table and we all got our thoughts out and our words out and duke it out, and we'd have half the meaningful conversations in the hallway, and I was just like, well, what was the point of having the meeting? And it was just that different style, that different, it's having different types, and then I end up with two kids that are, of course, on the opposite ends of that spectrum, and learning that you have to deal with things differently. And we
Mm,
are all so different, and
mm,
learning, how to express yourself, especially in those areas when you are an introvert or you are an extrovert, and when
mm.
it's not appropriate, or
Yeah, yeah.
and all of those sorts of things. But
Mm,
it's that part of that journey too, I think, of
yeah.
appreciating other people.
I think one of the greatest things that we can learn in our life is kindness. I think it's an underrated um, part of our lives. That patience, yeah, just the way we behave towards other people, especially if they're different from us. Um, just yeah, kindness is seriously underrated, and so I like to I like to try to be kind. Sometimes it works.
Yeah, it's really the simple stuff, isn't it?
Mm,
It's the usually simple and free stuff that has the carries with it the most value. And
mm,
even just smiling at somebody walking down the street, and somebody drops something and you stop to pick it up, or
yeah,
it's it doesn't have to always be a politically correct statement to not open a door for someone.
yeah.
There are little things, I think, showing more kindness. That's a great it's a great way to live. Do you have any other sort of tools and things that you sort of adhere to in your life, or some rules or principles that sort of keep you on the path that you want to be on? Kindness is a great one.
Mm. I guess the next one that comes to mind is fun and humor. Making people laugh is just something I do all the time, as much as I can, and it can really um, lighten the situation. I remember I was working it was her first day in the job, and she was really nervous, and she was taking notes about all the things I was saying, and she was quite a little bit uptight, and the later in the morning I this is a little bit inappropriate, so I hope you don't mind, but I leaned over and said, "I'm going for a wee crap." And then I went out to the toilet. And when I came back, she was much more relaxed, and just sort of relaxed into the job, and we became friends. And so just a wee little a bit of humor can just oil the cogs, you know.
Absolutely. And you felt lighter for it as well.
Yes, for sure.
Sorry, I couldn't resist,
No,
Susan.
that's great. That's my kind of thing.
Oh dear. Okay,
Yeah.
so we're sort of nearing the end here. Is You had mentioned that you were quite happy to share with our viewers a wee little gift of some
A wee
description,
little thing.
a wee little promo.
so so yes, as I said, I have an audio book of Catching the Last Tram, and I'd love to share that with you. So I'm going to have a website, a page on my website where people can go and put their details, and then I will do a draw. I don't know when to do it, actually. I mean to ask you. Um, in a couple of weeks, perhaps, or maybe a month or so, I'll do a draw, and someone will win a free audiobook.
Fantastic. And so we'll put those details in on the back end of the of our interview, and so people can uh, go into the website and put their names in, and they could potentially win an audiobook that is narrated by the author.
Yes, or me.
Fabulous.
With all the
Fabulous.
different accents, as well. I do a Welsh
Oh,
accent and a Scottish accent and an English accent, and
oh, of
Welsh.
course, because all the characters on the tram.
Yeah, they're all sort of from the UK, and there's an Aussie as well, but she only says one thing.
Oh, how fun. Oh, I can't
Yeah.
wait. Maybe I'll put my name in as well. All right. Well, listen, Susan, I'd really like to thank you, author, actor, wonderful Wahine, for sharing your life and your story about your work and how you stay happy and healthy, and the tips that are inspiring others to live authentically.
You're welcome. It's been fun. Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for joining us on the Authentic Living and Loving channel. If you have a story to share that will inspire others, we'd love to hear from you. Until we meet again, I'm Dr. Jordan Alexander, encouraging you to join the UBU revolution. Let's all live a life we don't need a vacation from.